Okay guys, time is of the essence here, so if you don't know what this video is about, please check out the description and post any questions in the comments. So we have a real-life Rails application. We have a user object, and that user belongs to a firm. It's kind of like an accounting tool. And that firm has many attorneys. And so we have to implement the backend functionality for creating attorneys. We already have kind of clickable front end. We have a dashboard and a link to the create attorney page. And so we're going to be doing the backend in a test-driven fashion. So you can see, what a real-life test-driven feature implementation looks like, start to finish, warts and all. There's probably going to be some typos, so bear with me on that. But hopefully you'll see a few ways to improve your own workflow, and hopefully we'll get this feature built together. So let's get it pulled up here. This is the app, and the first thing I told you, we have the dashboard and we have a link, but we don't have kind of a feature spec yet for this particular workflow. So the first thing down here at the bottom, let's try to blow this up a little bit more, make sure you can see it. So down here at the bottom on Vim, I can do E, spec features, create attorneys spec, and we're going to need our Rails helper, so acquire Rails helper, and then we can define our feature. So this is going to be creating attorneys, and the first thing, I like to kind of know that we know what's going on in our application here. So the first thing, I'm just going to create a simple scenario, visit dashboard, and this isn't, I'm not going to keep this spec. I just want to know that I understand that we can log a user in, get to the dashboard, and then get to that link. So if I go here, I know that on the dashboard we have some text at the top that says summary. So I'm just going to say expect page to have content summary, and I can run that. I'm using, let's get this thing out of the way. And put this over a little bit further. And so I can run my specs straight from Vim with leader S, which is nice. Okay, so it says it expected to find summary, but I can tell from this text over here that it looks like we're not actually in the dashboard. And that's pretty expected because we haven't logged anyone in yet. So one thing that we're going to need is the user object. Create user. And then we're going to need to log that person in. And I have I can, from my other from this other feature that I did yesterday, we can see that this is basically the setup we're going to need here to actually get a user logged in. So I'm just going to copy that over here. And now if I go to the dashboard page, I should get this to pass, and I do. So now we know that we can log a user and we can get to the dashboard. But that's actually not really what we care about. So I'm going to say scenario creates an attorney. And we'll keep this simple for now. I'm not going to add any context with potential other cases. This is supposed to be like the happy case. It's probably all we'll have time for right now. So creates an attorney, visit the root path, and that's going to get us to the dashboard. We know we're on the dashboard, and I told you that we have a link to create a new attorney. And we can just double check that here. Let's pull open the dashboard, and if I'm searching down here, I have a link to attorney list. So that'll go to the attorney list path. That's actually where we're going to create things as well. It's going to show a list of the attorneys, and it's going to have a little form where we can create a new one. And it all happens on that one page, which makes it kind of a nice, easily testable feature. So we know we can get to the dashboard. We don't need this anymore. We can say click link, and what we just looked at, attorney list. And so that should get us to the attorney list page. And on that page, I don't know exactly what that form is going to look like, but I do know that in general I like to have a form object there. This is just kind of a convention I use, attorney form. So whatever the object is, and then this form, and it's an ID. So this is going to be the ID on the form for a new attorney. And I know that attorneys have first names and last names. So we're just going to start with that. So let's fill in the first name with Mike, and we'll fill in the last name with Johnson, or Josh, Sean, whatever we want to go with there. And then we're going to do click button, submit. And again, I don't really know what that form looks like, so I'm just kind of filling in things that I want to be there, and then we're going to kind of see how it works. And since this attorney list page also shows the list and the form, if I click submit, what I'm imagining the user is going to expect is that you click submit, and that appears to the user like it just refreshes the page, and then Mike, John, Sean shows up in the list, and the form is then empty. So we can expect the page after they click the submit button to have content Mike, John, Sean. So let's see, we can run this with leader S, and it looks like on the right there we're seeing undefined middle name for a user. Okay, so let me show you what this page looks like. Attorney, let's see, attorney list. So like I said, these pages were all kind of stubbed out just so we could have some front-end functionality, and so we already had the user objects, we just used user for everything, and that's kind of the fake object that we're using here. And so user doesn't have an attribute middle name, and that's what it's complaining about. So we don't want to use a new user here, we actually want to do a new attorney. And bear with me if you kind of see this and you're like, oh my god, what is he doing? We're just trying to get kind of bare minimum functionality to pass in the test-driven, in the spirit of test-driven development. So if I run this again, we're going to get a complaint that Action View doesn't have attorney. That's because there's no such thing as attorney in this system yet. And so we need to create one. So down here at the bottom, you'll see I can do rails.g, that's rails generate model attorney. And I know the attorney needs to belong to the firm. So I can have a references field there, and then I know it needs a first name, and that's going to be a string, a last name, which is also going to be a string, middle name, which is going to be a string, and I'm just looking at the form up there to see what it's going to need, and then a suffix, since these are attorneys and they have pretentious additions to their names, we're going to need a string for this as well. And now when I generate that, this is a nice little Vim helper, rails.vim. Okay, so now I should have an attorney object in the system. But first, well, I can run this now, and it's going to complain that we have pending migrations. If I scroll up over there, that's probably what it's going to say. So I can pull up the latest migration using a quick little Rails.vim helper e-migration. It's going to create attorneys, reference the firm, put an index on it. That's what we want. First name, last name, middle name, and suffix. And so now if I do in the bottom here rake, that's going to create the attorneys table. So now we have an attorney. We can go and check out what this model looks like. A class attorney belongs to firm. It's probably about what we need. Let's pull that attorney list page back up. And to navigate these files, I'm using a combination of Rails.vim shortcuts and Control-P. And I just use Control-P just to jump to this page. So now if I run this test again with leader S, I'm getting undefined method attorneys path. And that's because the form builder is trying to build a path to the create method of this attorney. And so let me just jump over here, and basically that's a routes issue. So there's no such thing as attorneys routes. Now, I know that I want attorneys to belong to firms, so the place that it makes the most sense to put this is in the firms here as resources. So I like to do shallow routing just so I'm not too dependent on this relationship in the future, but obviously since you know it belongs to a firm, you need that kind of the create path and all that good stuff. So I'm going to put that there, and I'm still going to get a routing error because attorney's path still doesn't exist because I put it under firms. And if you just do the attorney object here, it's going to look for that attorney path by itself because it doesn't know anything about a firm. So we're done with the routes. I'm going to jump out of that. But what we need to do now is basically populate this with a firm and the new attorney that you're going to be creating, and that will let the form helper generate the correct path. So this is going to be in the attorney's controller, which we haven't needed yet, so it doesn't exist. So if I go down here and say app controllers, I can see the list of them. There are no attorneys controllers. So attorneys controller.rb, and that will give me a new attorneys controller. I can inherit that from application controller. And now we want this to happen in the new action. The reason that we could see the attorneys list page is because it's using the users controller. Because again, we're using users for everything just to populate kind of a clickable front end. And that kept it nice and simple, and we didn't have to generate controllers without tests and all that good stuff. So what's going to happen now is that we want to move this template over under the attorney's views and have it actually use this attorney's new action instead of the users controller attorney's list action, which is what it's doing now. So let's see how we're doing on time here. I don't want to drive you all to boredom. But we're just going to keep going with this. So I know that I need a firm here. We're going to handle the template stuff in a second. But I know I need a firm. So the current user belongs to the firm. We know that they have to have gotten to the dashboard. And we want the new attorney object to be basically a member of that firm. So firm has many attorneys, and then we're just going to build a new one there. Now, just so you believe me, this test is still going to fail because it's going to the attorney's path, and that's still linked with the user's controller. So what we can do, the link that it's clicking is down here, attorney's list. And if I want to go to the attorney's controller instead of, let's see if I can pull up the routes and just show you that, yeah, see how attorneys list here is going to user's attorney list. So let's get rid of that. And that's going to give us an earlier failure. It says no such thing as attorney list path. That's because the correct way to do this is going to be the firm, the new firm attorney path. And we want the firm populated in here. So the dashboard has a firm object. I know that just because I just worked on this, but you can see here, I just jumped into the controller for the dashboard. So new firm attorney path. And now that's going to go to the correct controller, but the let's see, undefined method attorney for firm. Okay, hold on. So we got to fix failures as they come. So if I go to firm, then I need to define this relationship as many attorneys, and try to run that again. Now, missing template attorneys slash new. That's because we had this this attorney list file, which is really not what we want. So I'm going to jump over here in the terminal and just move that. So I know that it's in app views, users, attorney list. And so we want to move that to app views. Actually, we need to create the directory first. So we don't have attorney view directory. So if I put this directory here, and then now we can move users attorney list to app views attorneys, and we can rename it at this point. So now we should have the correct template. I'm going to run that, and undefined method attorney's path. Okay, great. So that's what we're looking for, because we know that it's getting to this, well, it's probably getting to this step, and it's still pulling this attorney new thing. So I'm going to go back to my controller. So the attorney is here, so now we can use that here. Attorney. Now we should get a somewhat different. Okay, so template error, undefined method, attorney's path. Now we need to reference the firm here. So I'm going to wrap this in a little array. Do firm, attorney, path, and now that shouldn't give me the path. Oh, geez, here it goes again. So we know that we have the firm, we know we have the attorney. This is a nice thing about live. You can see I'm getting things that I don't expect, and so this is, let me talk through kind of how I would debug this. So I see this on line 26, so it's still complaining about this situation right here. And the question is, why is it trying to use attorney's path instead of firm attorney? Because I know that I pulled the firm object here. So know that we have a firm. We don't know that we have a firm. If that firm doesn't exist, then this won't work. So actually create attorney spec. Whoa. Create attorney spec is not what we want. That's an old one I was playing around with. Oh, the user does have a firm. So I might drop a little bit of logging in here. P firm. Okay, we can see that we have a firm. And let's see if we have an attorney. This is also confirming, by the way, that we're hitting the correct controller action because it's showing up in here. Okay, it's got a new attorney object, which is what we want. But if we run this test, still getting undefined attorney's path in the new action. Very unexpected. Check it out. The file we're editing is actually user's attorney list still. So I've screwed myself up by having this original file that is not the one that we actually need. So in this one, we were editing the old user's attorney list file, but in this case, we need the the new template. So now if we do new attorney, we shouldn't get this error. Okay, sorry about that. And so this is a, despite how many times you do this, you still you kind of always run into things that you don't really expect. So let's put my kind of ideal attorney attorney form helper in here. And so now I can find the form. It looks like it is correctly populating it based on what I want it to do over here. And now it's looking for a button called submit. But if you look at the buttons that we have add attorney and cancel. So I can just go over here and change the test and say add attorney. Rerun that, and the action create could not be found for attorney's controller. So this is what we would expect, because it's getting to this form, it's submitting the form, and now need to go back to my controller. So attorney controller, let's get a create action in here, And we want to do basically the same thing we did before, but we can take advantage of the routing that we've recently set up due to the tests and say the firm already exists, and we're going to get to that in a second. This is the code that I want, basically. So what I can do is say attorney equals firm.attorneys build based on the attorney params. And so there's two things in here that we don't already have. We don't have a setter for the firm, but we're going to add that in a second. And we don't have attorney params. So when we run this, it's going to find the create action, but it's going to say we don't have. It's basically saying we don't have attorneys defined on nil. And so let's add a little private setter here. Basically, we want to set the firm based on the params. So firm equals firm.find params firm ID, and then we can just add a before action set firm. And I like to limit these only on the actions that use them, and we can flesh that out or remove the scope for this before filter if future tests require us to. So if we run that now, we should get the param, but now we don't have this attorney params thing here. So I'm going to go down here and define that. Attorney params, and we can do the Rails standard require attorney permit. We've got first name, last name, middle name, oops, suffix, oops. So now we should be able to create this attorney. And it says it's missing the template because it's basically finding this, it's executing it, and then it's saying, okay, great, let's render the create template. But we don't want that. We're actually just going to redirect to the same page we were at because that will show us the list and presumably the new attorney that we just created for that firm. So it expected, now we're on the page again. We've submitted the form, we've created the attorney, and now it's expecting to find Mike Johnson in the list, but we haven't added that here. We just have this static table. And you can see, just to kind of fill it out, I did 5 times add the attorney Tyrion Lannister. But instead of doing that, we're going to do the firm has many attorneys. So we could either define an instance variable of attorneys, or we could just say firm.attorneys.each do attorney and get rid of this. And now these are going to be attorney.firstname. Oops. If you've watched any previous screencasts, you know I can't type a name consistently. And this is going to be interesting because the first name and last name in the design here, it looks like, are not actually together. So the test will fail even if this is working correctly because we need to change the test. So now, if I rerun it, expected to find text, and it didn't. But if we look carefully here, we should find first name, last name, middle name, last name, set of actions, age. Okay, so let's see if we do expect page to have Mike, and then also expect it to have his last name. And so it's still not finding it. And so the question is basically why? And it looks like, if we're looking at the text that it's looking in, it says dashboard, so it's got the nav bar, and then it's got attorney list, and then first name, last name, suffix, actions, and it has H and ABC. And so it does look like it's rendering this, but it's not. It's not rendering. It's not saving Mike Johnson's attributes correctly. So we're submitting the params here. We've got first name, last name, middle name, suffix, and presumably they're being sent, but we can check that. So if we do, p attorney params, then we can see what the app's sending. And so it is sending first name, last name, so it's sending this stuff correctly. And if we look at the, okay, so at this point I know what it's doing or not doing. So check it out. If we put the attorney object here, we see that the ID is nil. That's because we, in our haste, did this build instead of create. Actually, I'm going to use build there. You might not have time to get to that, but you want to do build and then save, and if the save fails, you want to render the page again so you can see what the errors were. But just to kind of hash this out, we see that now we are getting a passing test. So if we walk through what we have so far, we've got, we visit the dashboard, we click link to go to the attorney list. It's finding this form, attorney form. It's filling out the first name, last name, click add attorney, and then we're expecting the page to have content Mike Johnson, courtesy of a typo. And we run this again, and the test is passing. And then if we run the rest of our tests, we want those to pass as well. So clearly, we've got kind of an errant file here. Create attorney spec, where I was kind of testing out a couple things, and that was causing an error. So now if we run the rest of our specs, we'll see that we're passing. And we've got one pending because when we generated the attorney object, the generator gave us this attorney spec, which we can pull open, and it's pending. So we're going to pull that out. We didn't have anything that we needed to test on the model layer yet. So I like to kind of remove all of the extra stuff that we don't need here. We've got in the spec helper, it tells us what kind of test it is, so we don't need that. And so we can close that down. We've got all of our tests passing. And so at this point, we're basically ready to keep going, essentially. But I think the demo is getting long enough that you get the point of actually going through a real feature and not a contrived example. Places that you can get stuck, and getting stuck happens to everyone, and it's helpful to see kind of that process and how you might think through it. And hopefully a few kind of tips and tricks or encouragement to adopt Vim or Emacs or something that's going to speed up your development workflow. But if you saw anything in here that you are interested in kind of learning more about, just shoot me a message in the comments, and happy to kind of elaborate on anything you'd like. So thanks for watching.